When I had a stomachache, I called my boyfriend to take me to the hospital. On his end, it was all laughter and music. If your stomach hurts, just go to the hospital. My friend is back, and I'm throwing her a welcome party. Oh, by the way, I lost a game of truth or dare, so I have to block a female friend. I only have you and my friend in my contacts. It'll be undone after the game. A whole month passed, and he never unblocked me. On my wedding day, he showed up with a bouquet, trying to stop the wedding. As long as you turn back, I'll always be here, he said. I kissed my groom and replied, sorry, I'm not. At midnight, when my stomach hurt the most, I called Herman. I was in so much pain I could barely dial. On the other end, there was laughter, and music blared. Herman, my stomach hurts, I said, trying to endure the pain. If it hurts, go to the hospital. My friend is back, and I'm throwing her a welcome party. Oh, and I lost a game of truth or dare. I have to block a female friend. I only have you and my friend in my contacts. It'll be undone after the game. Before I could say another word, he hung up. Right after, I got a notification, he had blocked me. At the same time, I received a voice message. You lost the dare, so you have to block either me or her. Who do you choose? I'd block everyone else before I block you. Won't she be mad? Don't worry, she's always very understanding. In the morning, as Herman was heading out, I told him it was our anniversary and asked how he wanted to celebrate. He said, I'm just a straightforward guy. I don't know. You decide. But just minutes after he left, I received a friend request from his friend. She said, do you know why I chose today to come back? Because I wanted to see how much I mean to him. I accepted her request and told her I believed in my relationship with Herman. She laughed at me and said I was pathetic. And she was right. The love I cherished was nothing more than a way for someone else to test their importance. And I lost. I forced myself up, staggering downstairs. Just as I reached the bus stop, I collapsed. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. A man was sitting by my side, peeling an apple. Did you save me? I asked. Then I realized it was a stupid question, there was no one else here but him. He looked up, and our eyes met. It was Jacob. I had met him once before, but that time, he was drunk. He probably didn't remember me, but I remembered him. I worked in the marketing department, and I had to remember the faces of every higher-up. Eat your breakfast, he said. He sat closer and opened a container of porridge. I tried to take it myself, but I noticed the four in my hand. I had no choice but to let Jacob feed me. After breakfast, he threw away the trash. Get some sleep, he said. I shook my head. Where's my phone? Jacob glanced at me, then handed it over. I immediately checked. I called Herman first, still blocked. All my contact methods had been blocked. But his friend had sent me many messages. The most glaring one was a photo of her and Herman. She was nestled in his arms, and he was holding her close. It looked like yesterday was their anniversary, not mine. He still takes such good care of me. He knows I have stomach issues and wouldn't let me drink. He drank so much he threw up, so sweet. I told him I liked a new designer bag. He bought it without even blinking. Who says he doesn't understand women? He clearly does. Herman and I were not only a couple, we were also colleagues. He was the manager, and I was his secretary. During business trips, he always arranged for us to stay together. He told me he couldn't drink, so I always drank for him. That's how my stomach got ruined. Turns out, it wasn't that he couldn't drink, he just didn't want to drink for me. I didn't even have time to grieve before another photo arrived. In it, Arlene was lying in Herman's arms, completely unclothed. Sorry, we both drank too much last night. When we woke up, this had already happened. I trembled, struggling to breathe. While I had been fighting for my life, they had been having the time of theirs. Tears slid down my face. I desperately searched for any sign the image was fake, but there was none. Herman was sound asleep in the picture, wearing the necklace I had given him. Stop looking at that. It's filthy. Jacob took my phone and tossed it aside. I choked up, wanting to let out all my grievances. But when I opened my mouth, only sobs came out. Jacob panicked and tried to console me. He said, "That girl isn't even pretty. He must be blind." He said, "My sister calls women like her B*cheese. They never have a good ending." He said, "He's scum, and she's trash. They belong together. You're free now." He said, "You're amazing. There are better men out there waiting for you." I wiped my tears and seriously asked, "What's amazing about me?" Jacob was silent for a moment. "You can hold your liquor." I figured he had never comforted anyone before. I burst into laughter, sniffling as a tear bubbled up. Jacob grabbed a tissue and wiped it off for me. I never thought that the terrifying Jacob, whom everyone in business feared, would be this down-to-earth. Or that he'd wipe my nose for me. I spent the entire day in bed, trying to figure out what I had done wrong. After thinking all day, I came to a conclusion: Herman was just blind. That night, as the doctor changed my work phone rang. Everything else was blocked except for my work contact. I wondered, if it weren't necessary for work, would Herman have blocked that too? I looked at his messages and found them ridiculous. "Herman, Caitlin, I drank too much last night. How are you? Where are you? Is your stomach still hurting? Herman, I was wrong to block you. But you're my girlfriend. You have to understand, I lost the dare. I couldn't back out. Herman, I'm really worried about you. Please reply, okay?" His bombardment gave me a headache. Me, then why don't you unblock me now? Herman, because I said I'd block you for a month. I can't break my word. Me, then contact me after a month. Herman, it's such a small thing. Do you really have to be like this? I blocked him. Of course I did. That night, Jacob came again. He brought food. "I didn't know what you liked, so I bought a little of everything," he said while unpacking. I didn't expect him to come. He had already done enough by bringing me to the hospital. After all, we weren't close. "Thank you," I said, sitting up. I looked at him in confusion. He added, "Just call me Jacob. This isn't business. No need for formalities." I nodded. "Caitlin." "I know," he said. "You're the first person who ever drank me under the table." "I remember." "Then let Jacob win next time," I replied awkwardly. Jacob pointed at my fore. "Get your stomach better first." The next day, a colleague messaged me. Herman had reassigned all my work to the new girl, Arlene. Arlene had asked to transfer me to sales, and Herman had approved it. I wasn't even surprised. Since Arlene made her move, it's clear she wants to take everything that belongs to me. Even though the marketing and sales departments don't have a strict line between them, a transfer means all the effort I put in would go to waste. And then, I got another provocation from Arlene. "I told him I wanted to join your company, and he immediately arranged a position for me. He said we'd been apart for too long, and now he wants us to be closer." Don't be mad, after all, we've known each other since childhood, over 20 years of friendship, and we even. He must feel guilty toward me. I was so tired of her theatrics, I hit the block button. I felt exhausted, just wanting to cut all ties with these two toxic people. I quickly wrote my resignation letter. "What are you planning to do after you resign?" Jacob asked. I joked from my hospital bed, "Do you have a position available at your place?" "We do," Jacob answered seriously. "Are you kidding?" I didn't believe him. Jacob smiled. "My mentor told me about a student named Caitlin, very capable. He emailed her an invitation to study abroad, but she didn't go." It was the first time I really looked at Jacob, and his eyes were full of sincerity. I remembered when I was in college, I wanted to go abroad for further studies. There was a program where as long as your academic papers qualified, you could go. I eagerly sent an email to my favorite professor, but in the end, I never got a reply. The person who showed me the email was Herman. The person who went abroad was Arlene. I snapped back to the present and realized Jacob was wiping the blood from my lips. I had been so worked up that I bit my lip. The next day, I finished the handover at my old company and saw Jacob's car parked downstairs. At the same time, I got a WeChat message from him, "Get in the car, let's talk about your new job." I was about to walk over when someone blocked my path. Since I was just doing the handover, I was dressed casually. Arlene sized me up with a smirk on her face. She probably knew I had resigned by now. Although moving to the sales department puts you farther away from him, resigning like this isn't very smart. He's been too busy with our travels to comfort you. Our big adventure rule is to block someone for a month, so don't hold any illusions. Arlene's face wore a victorious smile. If this were before, I would have argued with her or cried, but now, I just found her childish. Tell him he doesn't need to comfort me. As I said that, I turned to leave, but then stopped and added, by the way, don't worry about me trying to steal him from you. I don't take second-hand goods. I opened Jacob's car door and sat down. As the car drove off, I saw Arlene holding up her phone, the flash going off in the rearview mirror. I knew exactly what she was trying to do, and I was looking forward to it. I officially started working at Jacob's company. The reason? He offered a generous salary. Plus, it didn't matter where I went, with him, I could also return the favor. After all, he didn't invite me to work with him out of pity, but because he valued my skills. I thought I'd be heartbroken and depressed for a long time. In reality, I didn't even have time to feel sad. Jacob had me working, and working. I didn't even have time to meditate. Every day, I'd come home and crash into bed, only to be woken up by his phone call the next morning. The first time I went out with Jacob for a business deal, I took some stomach medicine beforehand, just like I always did for business meetings. I prepared myself for a full round of drinking, but Jacob never even handed me a glass. It was the first time I realized that business deals could be made without alcohol. After signing the contract, I was still in a daze. Jacob couldn't help but laugh softly. As for alcohol, if you can avoid it, then don't touch it. Our goal is win-win cooperation, not drinking. I nodded vigorously. In my mind, I cursed my past self for being so foolish. Herman never cared about how to negotiate with business partners. He was always looking for shortcuts, and his shortcut was drinking. Those partners were always too drunk to remember, and that's when Herman would have them sign contracts. Just then, my phone rang. It was Herman. It had been almost a month and a half, and he finally thought of me. I pressed the answer button. Blocking you was my mistake, but we agreed to a month-long block, and I can't ruin everyone's fun. Don't be mad, be magnanimous. Come back soon, there's a business deal that only you can handle, the other party's tolerance for alcohol is something you can manage. You know, I can't do it without you. I prepared a proposal. If you help me close this deal, I'll propose to you. Jacob asked me if I was going. I nodded. Of course, I was going. I wanted to see how Herman and Arlene would be the ones who ended up getting humiliated. The next day, I arrived at the meeting place. Herman and Arlene were standing together. When they saw me, Herman quickly stepped forward. I calmly avoided him. He was so disgusting, I didn't want him anywhere near me. You've come, so let's forget everything from before. Help me close this deal, and I won't blame you for secretly moving out and blocking my work calls, Herman said. He didn't seem to notice anything unusual about my behavior. How laughable. What face does he have to blame me? Is it because of his thick skin or because he's just that trashy? Is that so? Well, I won't blame you for ignoring me when I was having stomach pain and almost died on the side of the road, and you still blocked me. I pretended to be generous, too. Herman's smile froze on his face. Arlene furrowed her brows. Are you joking? You look perfectly fine now. If you're lying to Herman about being blocked, then that's on you. He lost a game with us, and before the block, he already explained it to you. You shouldn't be so unreasonable. You're going to spend the rest of your life with him, and you can't even understand this small thing. What will you do when something big happens? Arlene's tone was dripping with sarcasm. Herman's face, which had shown a hint of guilt, immediately disappeared, and after hearing Arlene's words, he nodded like crazy. Yeah, I wasn't unreasonable when I blocked you. And anyway, with stomach issues, why come to me? You should have gone to a doctor, Herman said. He paused and added, all right, whether or not you're telling the truth, I'm just glad you're okay. If you're still upset, help me close this deal, and I'll make it up to you. Herman moved to put his arm around me, but I stepped back 2 paces. You guys have misunderstood. I never said I'd help you close the deal, I feigned surprise. What I said yesterday was ambiguous. I never agreed to help them. I only said, I'll come. Herman and Arlene's faces immediately changed. What are you talking about? I promised I'd propose if you helped close this deal. Don't throw a tantrum. Let's go, don't keep the other party waiting. Or, if you have any requests, let me know. I'll do my best to fulfill them, Herman urged. I crossed my arms and looked at him mockingly. I don't need anything from you. With that, I turned and walked away without looking back. Do nothing, just wait for my revenge. After I left, Herman had no choice but to take Arlene to meet the other party. But things wouldn't go as smoothly for them, would they? As soon as they stepped inside, the first thing they saw was several large crates of alcohol, all with an alcohol content of over 50%. Kent, we're here to do business. How are we supposed to negotiate after drinking so much? Herman looked at all the alcohol, clearly uneasy. Kent scoffed. Isn't this how we always do business? Drink first, drink until we're happy, then we talk business. Herman had no choice but to sit down, gritting his teeth. Arlene, on the other hand, remained perfectly composed. But she soon regretted it. With Herman's drinking capacity, he was out cold after just half a bottle. Kent pointed at her. He's down. You drink with me. Arlene had no choice but to pick up her glass and down it in one go. One glass wasn't enough. Kent kept pouring. Arlene couldn't handle any more and tried to wake Herman up for help. Glass after glass, bottle after bottle, the two of them ended up collapsed on the floor. Watching their sorry state, I was reminded of my past self. Back then, when I went out to negotiate deals with Herman, it was always the same. He knew I could hold my liquor, so he never shielded me from drinking. I often drank until I was completely wasted. But he seemed to forget, the only reason I built up my alcohol tolerance was because every time we went out, he never stepped in to help me. He even told me that since I'd be attending a lot of social events with him in the future, I needed to learn how to drink so he wouldn't have to worry about me. And I actually believed him. I drank like crazy to train my tolerance. But now that I've left, it's his turn to build up his own tolerance. When I snapped back to reality, Kent was already standing in front of my table. I quickly shut off the computer monitor and took out the contract I had prepared in advance. Pleasure doing business. Pleasure doing business. We signed our names. After my call with Herman yesterday, I had immediately contacted Kent and offered him a better deal. Today, Kent never had any intention of working with Herman. Even if Herman drank himself to death, Kent still wouldn't have signed with him. That evening, Jacob invited me to dinner. Feeling better now? Thank you for giving me so much authority. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to make Kent drop Herman and choose me instead. I sincerely thanked him. Save your thanks until you've settled everything, he said. I nodded. The next day, Herman called me again. Bring some hangover medicine. I drank too much yesterday. Are you satisfied now? If you've calmed down, just come back. I won't blame you. I admit I didn't care for you enough before. Herman's tone was as arrogant as ever. I took a moment to curl my hair before replying. Don't you get it yet? We're over, Herman. I'm officially breaking up with you. There was a pause on the other end, then a low chuckle. Enough with the tantrum. I'm giving you an easy way out. Just take it. Come take care of me, and we can go back to how things used to be. I wondered how I had once loved him so much that he felt entitled to treat me like this. Did you forget? When you gave up on studying abroad and fell into a slump, I was the one who stayed by your side. We've been through so much together. Even though you didn't help me secure the deal, I still bought a ring. All right, I'll come over. I interrupted him. I did need to see him, there were things I needed to take back. When I arrived at Herman's place, the whole place was a mess. The coffee table was covered in dust, and the kitchen reeked of mold. I frowned immediately. Back when I was here, I kept everything spotless. I'd deep clean the place every few days, making sure there wasn't a speck of dust. Judging by the state of things, he hadn't cleaned since I left. I pushed open the bedroom door, and the stench of vomit and alcohol hit me like a punch to the face. I gagged, almost retching, before forcing myself to step inside. Herman was lying on the bed, a trash bin beside him reeking with filth. I kicked it aside, the noise making Herman stir and open his eyes slightly. "I knew you'd come." He smirked. I placed the hangover medicine and a glass of water on the nightstand. He lifted his arm slightly, expecting me to help him up. I didn't move. Herman sighed and propped himself up on his own. "Heartless," he muttered before taking the medicine and drinking some water. I rolled my eyes internally. "Do you even realize how disgusting you are right now? I need to use your computer for something," I said. Herman nodded. "It's in the usual place." "Go ahead." "I'm hungry, make me dinner when you're done." I didn't respond and went to find his computer. Herman probably thought I was just sulking. If it weren't for needing an excuse to come here and retrieve evidence, I wouldn't have even brought him medicine. Make him dinner? In his dreams. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for in Herman's emails. A chat record from 3 years ago. The email that should have been mine, Herman had forwarded it to Arlene. And there it was, my old email account from 3 years ago. I remembered how, back then, I never received my professor's invitation letter. I had been devastated and depressed for a long time. Herman had stayed by my side, comforting me. Later, when everyone started job hunting, Herman encouraged me to do the same. At the same time, my email account had been hacked. No matter what I did, I couldn't recover it. Herman had consoled me briefly before helping me register a new one. Snapping out of my thoughts, I realized my hands were trembling with anger. I quickly took photos as evidence and shut down the computer. Before leaving, I took all the food from the fridge and tossed it in the trash. Let him starve. He deserved it. Holding the evidence in my hands, I couldn't suppress my excitement. A car pulled up in front of me. Jacob had come to pick me up. "I want to go to the police," I said. Jacob shook his head. "Not yet. Herman and Arlene have put you through hell. If we only get them arrested, they'll suffer physically, but their souls won't. We need to strike where it really hurts." The look in his eyes was completely different from his usual gentle demeanor. "You seem to hate Herman more than I do," I mused. "But I'm the one who suffered." At a red light, Jacob turned his head slightly and looked at me. He said, "He took away the one thing I treasured most." Herman's sudden phone call interrupted our conversation. "Where the hell did you go? You didn't make me dinner." There was a mix of anger and grievance in his voice. I couldn't help but laugh. "I told you, we broke up. Why would I cook for you?" With that, I hung up. There was no point wasting words on a self-absorbed jerk like him. But even after I hung up, he kept calling again and again, the incessant ringing giving me a headache. In the end, I blocked his number. I already had the evidence I needed, there was no reason to keep entangling myself with him. Rumors about me started circulating at my old company over the past couple of days. I only found out through former colleagues. Arlene accidentally posted a photo on Instagram. It was the moment I was sitting in Jacob's car that day. Just as the gossip about me sleeping with an older man reached its peak, Herman called me. I had already blocked his previous number, so this was a new one. "Caitlin, there's a limit to how long you can stay mad. If you really slept with that old man, there's no going back for us." "We already can't go back," I said. "That night during Truth or Dare, where were you? Who were you with?" Herman hesitated for a moment. "I was home alone that night." I let out a soft scoff. "Do you really think I don't know anything? Well, I suppose you never understood girls, so of course, you wouldn't know the kind of tricks we play." "What do you mean?" he asked. "Exactly what I said," I replied. After I hung up the phone, I sat at my desk and rubbed my temples hard. I just want these annoying things to end quickly. I don't want to see Arlene bouncing around in front of me anymore. Right when I was in the middle of a headache, someone knocked on my door. It turned out that one of the products we sold was being questioned by a customer, and they came to cause a scene. I quickly put aside my personal matters and went to handle it. The customer was extremely upset, and several people had already tried to calm her down, but she wasn't listening. "We'll have our after-sales team handle the issue with the product you purchased. Please be patient, and they'll give you a satisfactory response." I stepped forward to try and calm the customer down. But the customer's relative was so agitated that they picked up the ashtray on the coffee table and threw it at me. If it hit me on the head, a scar would be the least of my worries. Just as I thought it was over, a figure shielded me, and the ashtray hit Jacob's head instead. Jacob, who was a tall and sturdy guy, just slumped over softly onto my shoulder. I reached out to support his neck, and the warm, sticky liquid made me freeze in shock. The scene completely spiraled out of control. Everyone quickly called an ambulance. He got hurt because of me, and out of guilt, I took it upon myself to care for him. That night, when Jacob regained consciousness and tried to sit up, I quickly pressed him back down. Don't move around. If you need anything, just call me. I paused, then added, Are you trying to get yourself killed? The doctor said your head got injured. If the ashtray hit the same spot, you might be stuck in bed for the rest of your life. The wound from his previous injury was pretty big, and I couldn't believe the doctors didn't warn him. Twice, both times because of you, I really owe you. Jacob sighed and said. He said, twice. Before I could ask what he meant, the nurse came in to check on him. After the checkup, Jacob turned over and fell back asleep. But somehow, I already had an answer in my mind. The next day, I went out to buy food for Jacob, and just as I was about to head back to the ward, Jacob messaged me to come to the car and help him get something. I grabbed the item, locked the car, and then saw Herman walk into the hospital with Arlene. When he saw me, Herman quickly blocked my path. I had already moved out, and he couldn't find me. He'd called, but I blocked him, so meeting me here today, I knew he wouldn't let me go so easily. What are you doing in the hospital? And this car, is it your old man's? He asked. I raised my hand and slapped him across the face. You've got a filthy mind, don't assume everyone else is just as disgusting. Arlene stepped forward, gently touching Herman's half face, where I had slapped him. This is the same car I saw the other day. That old man must be in bad shape, and she's here taking care of him, Arlene implied. And you too? What are you doing at the hospital, a checkup for your pregnancy? I said. Arlene's face instantly changed, and Herman quickly shook his head. No, that's not it. She's just got a stomach ache. I nodded thoughtfully. I was just joking, why are you so nervous? With that, I lifted my foot and walked into the ward. Herman tried to follow, but Arlene pretended her stomach hurt, and Herman stopped to help her back. See? In the end, he still chose his friend. He doesn't like me as much as he claims. But fate has a funny way of working. Arlene was admitted to the hospital and just happened to be in the room next to ours. The walls were so thin I could hear their argument clearly. You're daydreaming if you think you and Caitlin could be together. I've already told your mom I'm pregnant with your child. Arlene, if you're going crazy, don't drag me into it. My heart belongs to Caitlin. Herman, wake up. You've slept with me, and she slept with someone else. It's over between you two. The reason she's with someone else is the very reason I still have a chance with her. We're the same type of people. Their argument was so loud that the nurse had to step in and remind them not to disturb the other patients before they calmed down. The next day, I finally understood what Herman meant by what he said yesterday. He cornered me in the break room, his eyes gleaming with a bit of excitement. Caitlin, Arlene and I really were an accident. The one I've always liked is you. See, I slept with Arlene, and you've slept with that old man. Now we're even. Stop being angry. Come back to me. Let's be together. Herman looked at me with hopeful eyes. How strange. When we were together, he acted like I didn't matter. Now he's playing the deeply affectionate card. I've never heard of a good horse eating its own leftover hay. But I've certainly heard of late love being cheaper than grass, I said. And by the way, I'm clean. I've never slept with anyone else, unlike some people who've gotten someone else pregnant. I turned to leave with the hot water bottle in hand. Herman staggered, barely catching himself on the water cooler to avoid falling. After a moment of dazed silence, he finally came to his senses, and by then, his hand was bright red from the burn. On my way back, I ran into Arlene in the hallway. She looked at me, gently touching her stomach, her face full of pride and smugness. I didn't understand what there was to be proud of about carrying the child of a scumbag. I'm pregnant with his child. If you still want to fight me for him, it's pointless, she said. I'd been abroad for my studies. With my background, his parents would be happy to have me as their daughter-in-law. Arlene threatened me with her words. I stopped and looked at her. Well, let me say one thing, stolen things always have to be returned sooner or later. I clenched my fists tightly. I wanted to call the police and have them arrested right now, but Jacob told me to wait, so I'll wait. Arlene clearly flinched. I turned and stepped into the ward. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, resting my chin in my hand, comfortably watching the leaves outside swaying in the breeze. A few minutes later, I heard their argument again from the next room. Herman, did you tell Caitlin about the emails? Do you have any idea that if you keep doing this, we're both going to be finished? You're talking nonsense. How could I tell Caitlin about this secret? If you didn't, how does she know? I don't know how she knows. Suddenly, there was silence from their side. Then the door to our ward opened. Herman and Arlene looked stunned. Ever since they moved next door, Jacob and I had lowered our voices so they wouldn't hear us. But now, they were realizing that the soundproofing wasn't good. Herman never told me. It's you who just said it to me. At the same time, I opened the voice recording on my phone, and their argument echoed throughout the room. Herman's legs gave out, and he collapsed to the ground. His face showed fear and regret. He crawled toward me, his expression full of pleading. Listen to me. I just liked you so much. I thought if you went abroad, you wouldn't be with me when you came back. Then Arlene said she had a way to stop you from leaving, so that's when everything happened. Caitlin, I really just love you too much. Herman grabbed my legs, and I instinctively kicked him away. He got back up and crawled toward me again. I really just love you so much. Please don't leave me. Let's get married. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Herman pulled a ring box from his jacket pocket. I already bought this. I was going to give it to you on our anniversary, but this woman made me give her a proper welcome first. I was wrong. I was completely wrong. Herman knelt on the ground, slapping himself hard. Arlene pulled Herman aside. You're crazy. Why are you proposing to her? The woman who's carrying your child is me. I'm the one you should be proposing to. Herman pushed Arlene away with force. You lunatic, how dare you show up in front of me? You ruined my love life. Don't think I don't know. You secretly sent Caitlin pictures of our bed. You asked me to pick you up from the airport, and I did. You asked me to block Caitlin, and I did that too, all so you could keep our secret safe. Why couldn't you just leave things alone and not destroy my happiness? They were really yelling at each other. I was so frustrated, my head was spinning. Even Jacob, lying in the hospital bed, reached up to rub his temples. You two might as well talk to the cops about this. I took 2 steps back. Just as Herman was about to say something else, the police had arrived at the door of the room. Seeing the officers, Herman and Arlene panicked. Herman rushed forward and grabbed my thigh, not letting go. When you were at your lowest, it was me who stayed by your side. When your project went wrong, I helped you fix it. When you couldn't come up with a plan, I stayed with you until late at night. And back in high school, when a group of thugs targeted you, it was me who saved you. At that moment, Jacob let out a sarcastic laugh from the bed. You saved her? When you chased off a group of thugs but ended up getting beaten senseless, your head was split open and you collapsed, nearly dying, you went back to comfort Caitlin and took credit for saving her, is that it? Jacob sat up and got out of bed. His head still wasn't completely healed, and I quickly shoved Herman away and helped him steady himself. Herman shook his head in panic. No, 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 who are you? How do you know all this? Jacob reached up to touch an old scar on the back of his head and stared coldly at Herman. Because that kid who got beaten senseless and almost died, the one who ran into you on his way home, that was me. You and Arlene, both of you are thieves. And stolen things, sooner or later, need to be returned. I instinctively gripped Jacob's hand tighter. I had suspected the truth all along, but hearing him say it out loud still shocked me. I wasn't the best student, but I wasn't bad-looking. When I was young, my family didn't have much, and I had to walk a long way home in the dark. Back then, there were no surveillance cameras and no street lights. Because I was pretty, I was targeted by a group of thugs. That night, after evening study, I was followed all the way home until I met a boy wearing the same school uniform as mine. I begged him to help me, and without saying a word, he took off his baseball cap and put it over my head. Then they fought. I was so scared I couldn't move, my legs were like jelly, and I collapsed to the ground. Through my blurred vision, I saw one of the thugs hit the boy in the head with a stick. I thought he must be in pain, and I prayed that he would be okay. Later, the boy came back to me and told me he was fine, and he'd walk me home. On the way, he told me his name was Herman. Since we lived nearby, from that day on, we started going to and from school together. Through more time spent together, our relationship grew closer and closer. After the college entrance exam, he confessed to me, and I agreed to be with him. But I never imagined that the way we met was something he had stolen. Arlene's laugh brought me back to the present. Holding her stomach, she looked at Herman sitting on the floor and mocked him. "Herman, so this isn't the first time you've done something like this." As everyone listened with interest to this scandalous story, Arlene ran over to the railing. "I'll tell you all, I'm pregnant. If you try to take me away, I'll jump right off. It'll be a double suicide." Instantly, chaos broke out. Jacob put his arm around my shoulder and reassured me not to panic. The officer stepped forward, trying to talk to Arlene, but every time one approached, she deliberately moved toward the railing. Just when the situation was at a standoff, a nurse walked over with a clipboard. "The baby doesn't have a heartbeat," the nurse said. "The doctor recommends you get an abortion immediately to avoid further health risks." Arlene froze as if struck by lightning, and then panicked. She rushed to grab the nurse's hand. "You're lying. How can my baby not have a heartbeat?" Arlene shouted. The nurse looked at her like she was crazy. "You've been drinking almost every day lately. You're lucky you didn't have a miscarriage already." Seeing how out of control Arlene was, the nurse quickly stepped back, scared, and hid behind the crowd. Arlene spun around and started hitting Herman, who was sitting on the floor. "It's you. You killed my baby. Why did you take me out drinking? Why didn't you stop me from drinking?" The police seized the moment when Arlene was out of control and quickly handcuffed her. Herman was also arrested. He pointed at Arlene, crying and laughing at the same time. "Retribution, ha 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 ha, retribution. Do you see? This is her retribution. She's getting what she deserves. Come back to me, please?" Herman screamed. He still tried to reach out to me, but the police didn't give him a chance, forcefully pulling him away. Arlene was charged with identity theft, and I had more than enough evidence. I wasn't planning to let her off the hook. She stole a life that should have been mine, and she needed to pay for it. The only twist was that after everything was exposed, and with her baby dead, Arlene went mad, losing her studies, career, and love life. She started telling everyone I stole her boyfriend, saying that as an average university graduate, I could never compare to her, someone who had studied abroad. She even said I was the mistress of an older man. But she had lost her mind. What she didn't realize was that she hadn't even graduated from the foreign school. The school had expelled her over the incident. And everyone knew I wasn't anyone's mistress. But her affair with Herman was common knowledge now. After going mad, she posted photos of herself and Herman in bed on work groups and Instagram, and told everyone they were together while I was the third party. As for Herman, he believed that if he admitted his mistakes and turned over a new leaf, I would come back to him. So, he confessed to all his crimes. When he went to prison, he asked me to visit him, but I was too busy. Jacob had been discharged from the hospital, and I had to be with him. With things finally winding down, Jacob and I went back to work at the company. He had accumulated so much work during his hospital stay. We worked non-stop for over half a month, and both of us were completely exhausted. "We're finally done. You can take a good rest now," Jacob said as we walked out of the company. I nodded. "You too." After that, we both fell into a silence. Actually, when Herman's identity theft was exposed, we should have sat down to talk about everything, but we had been buried in work. Now that things were quieter, neither of us knew where to start. "Do you still want to study abroad?" Jacob suddenly asked. A while ago, I had considered it, but with all the work piling up, I had become used to this routine. If someone told me to go back to school now, I wouldn't even know where to start. "I guess I do, but I won't go," I answered. I wanted to, because there were regrets and a sense of unfulfilled potential. But as for not going, I looked at the man walking beside me under the streetlight and realized I was okay with how things were now. Besides, if I went, they might not even accept me anymore. Jacob took an envelope out of his suit pocket. "Go ahead, I managed to get you a spot," he said. I was stunned. Jacob reached out and ruffled my hair, smiling. "I just so happened to be heading abroad for the next 2 years." I quickly took the envelope from him. This time, I had to seize the opportunity. Half a month later, I boarded the plane. Jacob was traveling with me. The company had arranged a place for him to stay overseas, not far from my school. During my studies, he would visit my professor, though, in truth, it was just an excuse to see me. On holidays, he took me to the beach for vacations. One day, he held a bouquet of flowers in front of me and confessed his love. We shared our first kiss on a Ferris wheel. I didn't disappoint him. I successfully earned my master's degree. 3 years later, we returned home together and held our wedding. Dressed in a pure white wedding gown, I stood in front of the mirror. Suddenly, a long-lost figure barged in. He shoved a bouquet of flowers into my hands, along with a ring. The ring was too small. He grabbed my hand, desperately trying to force it onto my ring finger, but no matter how hard he pushed, it wouldn't go in. He rubbed my finger raw and red. How could this not fit? I remember it being the perfect size. Herman was flustered. 3 years had passed. He had been released from prison. I pulled my hand back, only to fall into a warm embrace. Jacob lifted his chin, looking down at Herman from above. "Back then, you used despicable means to get her, but you never cherished her. You dragged her to business parties, made her drink, and left her weak and exhausted. These past years, by my side, she's never suffered. She's flourished, strong, vibrant. What once belonged to you no longer suits her. Oh, and do you remember? You cut Caitlin off just to please your so-called friends. She collapsed on the street from a stomach ulcer and nearly died. That was the day I found her again. You were the one who pushed her away. Don't come crawling back now, groveling at her feet." Herman clutched his head in regret. "Caitlin. You really fainted? You almost died on the street?" Hearing his question, I felt no waves in my heart. Maybe it was because he no longer mattered to me. His attitude didn't matter either. "Yes. I told you before, but you never believed me." Jacob wrapped an arm around my shoulders and led me outside to begin the ceremony. Herman chased after me. "Don't leave me. Come back, okay? No matter what, I'll always be here waiting for you." I didn't look back. Instead, I firmly held Jacob's hand. "Sorry, I'm not here anymore." He didn't follow me this time. Instead, he laughed and cried hysterically until security dragged him out. Later, I heard that Herman had lost his mind. He bought a doll and named it Caitlin, his wife. He even planned to marry it. The ring he never got to put on my finger, he slipped it onto the doll's hand. One day, we happened to pass each other on the street. He dropped the doll. The ring rolled into traffic. He chased after Jacob and me, running after our car. But no matter how fast a person runs, they can never catch up to a moving car. Just like leaves can never catch up to the wind. He would never catch me again. The end.